So does it ever make you sad that you don't generally get to say a proper goodbye to our listeners?
Uh, no,
Okay.
I don't.
Just don't
What
really
would
don't
that even
really like them.
be?
I just I mean it's no secret at this point that I rule this podcast with an iron fist. Um but I was listening to a different podcast the other day and they had a very true at the very end, they're like each of them like said again who they were and then said what it was and then goodbye. And I was like, William never gets a chance to do that.
I,
I mean, sometimes I just end it abruptly, but I'll sometimes say goodbye. But like, you never get a chance because you don't know when I'm going to hit that button.
I don't. It's not important. I don't think that I have anything to say at the end. I don't often have anything to say at the end, so it doesn't matter.
All right. Well, goodbye, everybody. I was just kidding. I wasn't actually. No, I wouldn't do that. That's you. I'm being silly. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Magical Talking Hat podcast, the only podcast in the world that is gonna send you an invoice any day now. Like this is not free. I you may have been led to believe that, but we're sending each and every one of you an invoice, probably for $10. We'll see. I'm Tony,
And I'm William. This is episode 629.
and I remembered that correctly this time. And today is bright and sunny and cold.
Yeah, it's
And
kind
I'm
of cold
not
outside.
happy about that because I'm planning to grill this evening.
Mm.
And I purposely waited till today because other days there was a big chance of rain and stuff. And I'm like, no, it's not. And it's gonna be cold. So, um, if you're just joining us for the first time, welcome. This is part one of two, so it's important that you listen to me now because in the next part, I'm not going to tell you. So, here's how the podcast works. We have a hat. It is magic in that it has its own email address. What other hat have you heard that has that? Probably not. I mean, that Harry Potter bullshit. Nope. No email because that's a Muggle thing, or a No-Maj thing, or whatever. Uh, anyway, people write into that email address, themagicaltalkinghat@gmail.com, with whatever the crap they want, and the hat magically forwards it to us. We read them, we talk about them. That's a show. Although this is going to be tough because we got 2 full episodes and 2 emails. So
Yeah.
we gotta vamp. So what's in the news? Like, you hear about this? You hear about this in the news?
Yeah, I'm outraged by it. Let's be outraged for an hour.
I still the only news I ever get is when whatever the cold open is on Saturday Night Live. It's the only time I get news. And I usually don't like it.
Mm.
But every once in a while I will follow thing because I still will look at like Twitter and Facebook about once a day just to see if I have messages or whatever. And occasionally I scroll, and then occasionally I find out about things. And every time I'm like, I have made myself less happy and no more productive or useful at all about
Yep.
this.
Yep.
Nope. And if it's something real crucial, my wife tells me because she's still hooked on the train, like all the rest of you freaks. So yeah, this is a two-parter because next week, literally the day of next week, is my mother's 80th birthday.
Mm.
And we will be in Oregon, and I am very intently putting no plans on that day because it's her 80th. That's the whole point. We're going out there, celebrate her 80th. Now, the week after that, I'll still be out there, but we'll record at some point because we'll just be hanging. My family's going to come for a while, and then they're going to leave, and then we'll still just be there having a vacation. So
Mm.
I'm into that. And this is the first time we won't be moving. We're all meeting up at this place at the beach with condos there, and we're just going to stay there the whole time. So often in the past, we go to where my family is and stay for a few days, and then we'll go somewhere else. But this time, only got to unpack once. I'm very excited about that. Anyway, how was your week?
It was fine. The grandson turned 2 on
Yeah.
Saturday. That was they had a little get together at the rec center in North Liberty. That was fun.
Oh, cool.
We also saw Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. We saw that.
Did
theater.
you?
Yeah.
And
it felt a little like except for how long it was, and for me, it was a little too long. It felt like the pilot of a streaming show.
interesting.
A good pilot. I mean, a really good one where I'd go, yeah, I'm going to watch this. The special effects are really good. The characters are really good. I felt like this role for Chris Pine was like really good, like a really good leading role for him. I thought, I don't know if I think it's really worth going to see in the theater. Actually,
I mean, I doubt we will, but
yeah, I think everybody should see it because I think it's a fun movie. But I don't think you have to see it in the theater. Now, here's the thing about it though. So everyone's talking about this. Oh, this is a Dungeons and Dragons movie, and it's actually a pretty good one. The critics like it. The audiences like it. Its box office performance wasn't super, but it's adequate. So everyone's thinking, oh, well, they had those really terrible Dungeons and Dragons movies in the early 2000s. So people are kind of excited about it. But my observation is, so these are in the Forgotten Realms aspect of D&D. And it's I think it's worth it to mention that, because that is a fairly specific thing. I mean, Forgotten Realms is so specific.
yes. However, it is essentially the default D&D setting in the current version.
Really?
Yes.
I didn't even know
It
that.
became so popular, and all the games and stuff were Forgotten Realms based. It's kind of the default. Way back in the day, it was Greyhawk, but Greyhawk has really lost popularity. Weirdly, we're playing in the Greyhawk world in my game currently. But no, I'd say Forgotten Realms. Insofar as there is a default D&D setting, it's Forgotten Realms at this point.
Well, because I'm watching the film, and I'm thinking, wow, there are a lot of things in here that if you played the 2 Baldur's Gate games that was on PlayStation back in the day.
The Dark Alliance ones. So not the isometric, not the other ones. You mean the console ones? Okay.
Yeah, the
arguably the less famous Baldur's Gate games, but
you're right. I'm talking about the Dark Alliance ones, but
which you and I both played with
for that matter, if you did play those other ones on the PC, or you played Neverwinter Nights or anything like that, there were a lot of things in the movie that, let's say you've never played the tabletop game at all. There were a lot of things in the film you'd go, oh, that's a Easter egg, for the video game, because there were a lot of things in the movie that are in the games. And so
much more than the old one, from what I can tell.
Yeah, but nobody's really talking about that. I'm finding it's like when I hear critics or I hear people talk about it, nobody's saying, hey, if you ever played the Dark Alliance games, or even if you played the PC games, because Neverwinter is in the film. It's a location.
Oh, nice.
Film. You go there.
Yeah, it's one of the most famous D&D cities.
Right. So, so as a person who I played the console games, I didn't actually play those PC games, but I am aware of them, and I've actually read a lot about them and what the plots were in them and things like that. So, I'm watching this film, and I don't think I've ever played a Dungeons and Dragons game ever.
A tabletop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever have. So I couldn't connect to it on that level. But as someone who's played Dark
The-
Alliance and is familiar with the other games, I could, oh yeah, I know what that is. I know what that is. That kind of stuff.
Knowing your background in tabletop role playing and knowing that outside of your specific play, I'm probably one of your biggest sources of influence with regard to tabletop role playing. Almost all the people who have influenced you kind of hate D&D. And I am coming around. I don't hate D&D. It would never be my choice to run. And honestly, if somebody gave me options of what to play in, it would seldom be my choice to play in either. It's not my kind of game. It's very much not Dave Avid's kind of game.
Mm.
So it makes sense you've never played D&D. We can remedy that pretty easily. But it is a little gamier, and it is, which sounds weird, like I'm talking about how it tastes. And it's the grand old dame, which means for all of its adjustments and refinements, and there are many, and not all some of the additions are vastly different, it holds on to things that more modern games are like, that's a dumb mechanic. And including things just like fucking hit points. Some people think hit points are too weirdly abstract in a way that doesn't work for either narrative or simulation. So
there were some really good action sequences in it, and I couldn't help but think every time. And maybe some people would think that makes it worthy to see on the big screen. I don't know, but I couldn't help but see these sequences go by with our hero characters fighting and stuff. I couldn't help but think, man, what kind of role must they had to get through the fight that way?
nice. See, you
like,
said
wow.
it didn't read. You got it.
That had to be a
It's
killer
there.
role for that action scene to be what happened.
See, it cracks me up because the only review I've heard was a semi-facetious review just said in chatter on a live stream I was watching from somebody who'd seen it, and they were complaining about lack of rules continuity in places. They're like, so and so wouldn't have been able to attack that many times, and they thought that was pretty funny. I do have a question for you that is a spoiler, I suppose. And I'm fine with this, but I just want to let listeners warn it. I think it's a minor spoiler, but I think it's important. And keep in mind, as far as what this movie is about, I know virtually nothing, except a couple of the cast members. But I also happen to know one of the cast members is Michelle Rodriguez.
Mm-hmm.
So, like Sean Bean before her, I just want to be prepped beforehand. She die?
Dude. There's one character you have to ask that question about, and that's exactly the wrong one.
She does? All right. Are you hesitating because you don't think I genuinely want to know? Are you hesitating because it is a more complicated answer than yes or no?
It is a more complicated answer than yes or no.
Okay.
It's a more complicated answer than yes.
All right, then we can leave it. Michelle Rodriguez, like Sean Bean before her, dies in fucking every movie. And I just wanted to know up front that, do we need to prep for that or what? And honestly, if you had said no, I would have been like, did you stay past the end credits? Because maybe she dies after that. Because Michelle Rodriguez dies in every movie. She dies in movies that she already died in. Like, she comes back in sequels through hand-wavy sci-fi or whatever, and then dies again. I think there's at least one movie that she dies twice in that I know of. She dies all the time.
Well, another thing I could say about it is I sometimes I had that feeling like I have in like Harry Potter movies where I feel like this only fans are going to understand this, that, or the other thing. And sometimes that was me because, like I said, played a couple video games, but often it was not. But I mean, the critics love it. Audiences seem to love it.
I have not heard bad things. The worst I've heard is it's better than it deserves to be. That's the worst
mm,
criticism I've heard.
well, I'm not sure. I'm not. I feel like standards are pretty low, and so I think that helps it. Again, I don't think there's anything wrong with it at all. I'm just saying, I think if someone pays to see it in the theater and they have to sit there for more than 2 hours watching it, that might not be quite as enjoyable as just watching it in your home and you can
Yeah,
pause it when you have to go to the bathroom or whatever, because it's
I
really
think that's
not
true for most movies though these days. I'm not sure I'll
these
ever go back to a theater.
these days. I think you're right. But I thought it was fun and I really liked, actually I really loved um uh all of the characters were so good. Michelle Rodriguez's character was so good. And I often like her in things, but I really liked her in this. And again, I felt like Chris Pine is sort of really being the lead, the unambiguous lead of this, really did a great job. Like almost like he was born to play this role. Someone told
I
me,
don't want to gainsay his abilities as a dramatic actor, but that semi-comedic leading man, vaguely John Hamish kind of role is really his sweet spot.
yeah,
I
that
mean,
kind of is.
even to the degree of the Wonder Woman movies, for all that the second one was hot
Right, right.
garbage, he did a great job.
Someone told me that the cast played D&D as a, like, like not just as a thing to do, but like, well, you're going to train, you're going to work out, you're going to train with weapons, and you're going to play D&D, like that kind of thing.
I have not heard such a thing. I would not be at all surprised, and I think that's a smart idea
I think that would
because
be
you
a
want to
smart
get
idea
into
too.
that mindset. And
Yeah.
D&D right now is bigger than it ever was. That
Mm.
other movie, I mean, there's so many other reasons why that movie was just an objectively terrible movie for some very obvious reasons, the 2001. But another thing is that D&D is huge now. D&D has commercials on TV and shit. I mean, like, it's a thing. And it's gaming in general is getting a broader base, but D&D has always been the spokesperson for tabletop role playing.
Mm.
And that's why I've never ever been too mad at D&D, because for all that it's not my kind of game necessarily, I'm so glad that it's out there letting people know such things exist. And watching certain actual plays, including mostly the Dimension 20 stuff. I'm currently watching a new campaign of that I'm really digging. It has shown me how much you can do even within the D&D system
Mm.
that is still very flexible and very fun and like very role play and
Well, I hope I hope you can see it, and then when you do, you have some
I
insights
mean
on it. I
I
mean,
definitely will see it at some point, even if it turned out it was terrible. There was not a version I was not going to see.
yeah, I thought
But
it was
yeah,
okay. I liked it all right. But
cool.
but besides those things, not a lot going on with me. How was your week?
Not much. We are in the prep stages for leaving, and it's a
Hmm.
pretty long trip, so there's a lot more. And of course, me and my compulsive tendencies and things. So I'm like figuring out, okay, how much food in the fridge and how many days left, and can we eat it? Like, because I don't want to waste about, but we're still probably going to have to throw some out because I'm like, some of it's not going to last.
Mm.
But we're seeing very carefully on that. We're planning a lot of things. We're planning stuff there. I was talking to my sister and working stuff out. I'm real excited. Like I'm excited for all the aspects. I'm excited to see everyone. I'm excited to hang out with them for a few days. Haven't done that. I'm real excited to hang out for a couple days with my niece because I haven't been able to hang out for more than like a couple hours with her in years. And she soon may be moving to another country. So this is a good opportunity. But
Mm.
and her birthday's today. So
Another country, huh?
yeah, she spent a semester abroad in Norway and really loved it. And it was really suited to her field of her degree and her hopeful field of occupation, which is environmental ecology. And she made some absolutely dear friends who are natives. Um, and so she's graduating soon, and her parents gave her a plane ticket. She's going over there for 3 months, and she's going to mostly stay with friends and stuff. And that is basically 3 months to figure out, if she wants to live there and if
Hmm.
it's feasible, but she's got some good ins for jobs and stuff like that. So it seems very possible.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm very excited for her for that. But yeah, it means I'll see even less of her.
Yeah.
Um, but you know, it's cool. But I'm very excited. We're gonna hang out for a few days, so that'll be nice. Um, we saw a couple of movies. Oh, we've been doing this lately where somebody references like an older movie, and I'll be like, "Have you seen that?" And if one of us hasn't seen it, the other one's like, "Oh, we're going to show you that." Or if neither of us have, we're like, "We need to watch that." Well, we watched some. Oh, we watched Escape from New York recently, John Carpenter, that we had never seen.
Right.
Whatever,
You
it's
talked about
fine.
that one.
Yeah. But Trish never saw Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome.
I've never seen that either.
Um, and I've never seen the original Mad Max. A lot of people have not seen the original Mad Max. I did see Road Warrior. It was eons ago. I was probably a child and it was on TV or something. I've seen Beyond Thunderdome a few times. And Trish is a very big Tina Turner fan.
Hmm.
So that also interests her. And the Mad Max movies are hilarious because every single one, despite the fact that they are made by the same dude, even the new one, it's all George Miller's stuff. They are all tonally completely different from each other. And it's kind of hilarious. And Beyond Thunderdome was the point where we did sort of a big blockbuster action comedy kind of thing
Hmm.
in a way. And so I had her watch it, and she's been married to me too long because she spent a lot of time complaining about aspects of the world building. And I'm just like, yeah, the post-apocalyptic 1985 action movie does not have all of its like continuity of world building worked out. You're right. But I'm like, you've clearly hung around with me too long because that's the kind of shit I complain about. But I think she loved it. It's just a fun event. Like it's dumb as hell, but it's a fun time. And it has a lot of stuff in it that I think is very creative, especially for the time frame. The motivations and moralities and stuff of the various characters make no sense because it's a mid 80s action. Like the bad guys are good sometimes and the good guys are bad sometimes in ways that are arbitrary and never explained. And every once in a while somebody does something really stupid so that the next set piece can happen, that kind of shit. But it's I mean it's very of its time. It's also got some things in it that I'm not that are kind of problematic these days. Uh but in general, it's just a fun time. And I don't understand Australia's obsession with feral children, but it's there nevertheless. Um, so that was fun. But I want to tell you about a different. I watched a movie the other night, and it ended up being a very strange experience for me. So I put Trish to bed. I'm looking for a movie, and I got a wild hair again for that whole. I want to do the found footage horror bullshit. So I have some apps that are specifically some streaming apps that are specifically that
Hmm.
are free ones. And so I'm going through one of those, and lo and behold, they actually had new stuff on there. They usually don't, but they had this one, and I decided to watch it. It's called Followers. It was released in 2021, and it's a British movie, and it's of a subgenre that is newly coming around that I'm enjoying, which is not the paranormal investigators do something. It's aspiring YouTubers happen upon like they move into a place that seems like it's haunted, so then they do more digging and then are horrible and die, as these are meant to be. Um, and this is one of those. Actually a former disgraced YouTuber goes to college and is trying to start his channel again, and then they discover the place might be haunted, and so him and his roommates turn it into a whole thing, and it becomes one of those where like part of the story is their newly acquired fame and whether people believe them or not and stuff like that. So it's pretty standard so far. It's not. I mean, it's fine. It's good, but it's good on the level of these movies. So, it does, to my shock, because it's a very low budget, no one seems to ever have heard of it, British film, but it has a British actor in it who I know, and who I know has done stuff
Hmm.
and is in a relatively unimportant part. And I'm very confused by this. And I feel bad for them. And I should have known better. It's like the old mystery of the week, what we call castle rules in this house. If you're watching an episode of Law and Order and there's an actor that's really famous on there, they're the murderer. You should know right up front. So it's that kind of so like the last 10 minutes of this movie, there's a twist, and it was pretty original,
Hmm.
which is not a thing I've ever been able to say about any of these movies.
Hmm.
And pretty original and pretty disconcerting conceptually. Like, it wasn't like it was super gory or anything, but like the concept for me was very sort of disconcerting.
Hmm.
Not in a gross way, just spooky. And as we're like dealing with the climax and the revelation of this, the thing craps out and sends me back to my TV's main menu. So I go back in, and luckily it remembered where I was, and it plays like 15 seconds. It was back a little bit and it did it again. It did it like 3 times. I'm like, fuck. We just had this huge revelation, and now I can't watch the rest of it. But luckily, I found out, because I did some quick searching, it's on Tubi.
Hmm.
So I run over to Tubi, find it, fast forward to the end, have to sit through like 6 commercials because they're like, dude, you just fast forwarded through like 80 minutes worth of movie. I'm like, whatever, fine. And then I see the end. And it's weird. And there's even more twists later. And that's kind of freaky. And so I'm in a very weird headspace here late at night.
Sure.
And the credits start. And I'm just sort of sitting there, a little bemused. And it has one of those in memory of someone at the top, which happens in movies. Somebody died during making of it, whatever, it's fine. And I don't think much of it. And then the credits are rolling, and I see that name again under written and directed by.
Hmm.
And I'm like, the writer and director of this movie died before it was finished?
Hmm.
And so I look it up, and this guy, it was his first ever feature film, but he has had a long and prolific career in British television, producing, writing, collaborating with a lot of people, and was much beloved when it turned out in 2020 he got some sort of very serious cancer diagnosis.
Hmm.
And after some real rough time of treatment, he died of it. And I ended up finding a bunch of stuff. He worked with other people and talked a lot about his experience of dealing with cancer and all this. And so by the end, I did not sleep well that night at all. My head was
Hmm.
just so many places. But
Hmm.
if that is a kind of movie people like, I would recommend it. It's called Followers, which you got to watch out. There's a few of them. This one's about college kids and the ghost and whatever. But I thought it was an interesting change of pace. You do want closed captions on, probably because there are a variety of UK accents on display. And while I am pleased to say it is not one of those fucking movies that basically ad-libs its lines, it is done in proper naturalistic style with people talking over each other. So like sometimes it can be hard to follow if you don't have captions.
Hmm.
But I thought that was pretty cool. And then last night I watched one called Chasing the Devil that made me like Followers even more. It wasn't like bad in that I'm sorry I watched it, but it was bad. Like, it was actually really well done, but really poorly written. I mean, we literally had a character who could read Hebrew, and somebody was like, how the hell do you know that? And he said, 6 years of Jewish school. And I'm like, you just used the word Hebrew and you don't know it's called Hebrew school? And just a lot of like people doing like a lot of lines that just don't make sense. It was one of those scripts that it's like nobody sat down and thought, is this really how people talk or how people interact? And so And also it to my opinion did not have a particularly clever twist. I didn't necessarily see it coming, but they're like that, and I was like, oh, it's twist 3A. Yeah, no, I've had this before in these kind of movies. I get it. Um, but yeah, Follow is pretty good. I'm trying to think what else. I had Trish watch Girl on the Third Floor, which is not a bad movie. It's by that same guy, Travis. Oh God, I really need to start remembering his names because we're a huge fan. The one who did Jacob's Wife and Wounded Lamb, who I told you about that we really liked, and Trish said, how does he understand misogyny so well? This Girl on the Third Floor is one of his earlier movies. I think his first, maybe. And it's not bad, but it's weird to see it after you've seen the other ones because it's not nearly as good.
Right.
But it's still fun to watch that. We are watching Hello Tomorrow
Mm.
on Apple TV, which you have watched.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Are you
Mm-hmm.
still watching?
Yeah.
Okay. Because it's not done. In fact, tomorrow I believe is the final episode.
Mm.
How do you feel about it?
I thought it started pretty strong and it's starting to sort of trail off at the end, I think, sort of for me.
That makes me very nervous.
But I really liked it at first. I'm not saying I don't like it now. I'm just saying that I thought it was like really interesting at first, and then later, I felt like they took the story in a direction that it's one of those deals where you think I wish they would have stuck with this plot line longer instead of letting
Oh,
it trail off into somewhere else or end. I wish they'd
then
stuck with that.
maybe I'll be happy.
So you don't like it so far?
No, well, I have very complicated feelings about it.
Oh,
Uh, so for those of you who don't know, it's a show on Apple TV, and the basic premise, and I want to be careful to spoil absolutely, but it is set in what the 1950s thought the future would be, or to put it in a way that some of you may understand, it's set in the world of Fallout before the apocalypse happened.
yeah, it's kind of
It's it's a very 50s 60s sensibility, but like there's fucking robots everywhere and the cars hover and things like that. And it follows a group of people who are selling condos essentially on the moon. And it's their story of their trials and tribulations related to this. That's as much as I'm going to say about that. I love the vibe. I love the setting. It's really fun. And that's how I know, sort of however it goes, I'm going to watch it to the end.
yeah. Me too.
The story, other than superficially, has nothing to do with the setting. You could do this story and just have it set in 2022 Florida or whatever,
That's right.
and have the same story.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I care about the story too much. But in defense of that, and also in further damnation of that at the same time, we have just finished 3 episodes. And I would say it was only near the tail end of the 3rd episode that we stopped what I would call the establishing section.
Mm.
We went through over a quarter of the series just trying to give you a sense of what the premise was.
Yeah, kind of.
And it was in that 3rd episode that I was like, okay, things need to start happening. And then some things did, or at least they promised us they would.
Right.
some plot hooks got triggered that theoretically will lead to stuff. So I'm caught where I'm like, I don't dislike it. I also 3 episodes in now still couldn't really tell you what it's about.
Mm.
We're just kind of hanging and doing, I mean, we're doing things, but nothing that seems big.
Right. I mean, I like the setting and the design and the
It's super cool.
performances.
Oh
The
yeah, you're right.
performances I think are really good. But
Billy Crudup and Hank Azaria and a dude whose name I need to learn because he's in every goddamn thing right now. He plays the consumer advocate guy.
oh yeah.
And the
Yeah,
way I
he's
know
in
him is
lots of
he
things.
very clearly used to have a cleft palate and had
Right.
it surgically. And he's been in Our Flag Means Death. He's in the new Nike movie. I saw him in something else. He is hot right now
Yeah, he's everywhere.
as just like side characters. And he does a great job. And so I'm really happy to see him again. I need to learn his name because he's shown up everywhere. And then a bunch of other people I don't know, but that do a great job.
Yeah, it's really fun to look at. It's fun to watch these people do their craft. But as far as the story goes, you're absolutely right. There's it doesn't really lend itself especially to any of that. Um I mean, I don't, yeah, I'm not sure that it ever will. I think some of the dialogue is really good too, but yeah, what it's about, that's a really good question. I don't know if I could explain to someone what really it's about. It's
And
just fun to
I
watch.
can't shake the feeling that if it were just set in a mundane world, I wouldn't want to watch it. And that's a problem for me.
Yeah, I get you. I
Um
think that's probably true for me
because we
too.
also have a lot of really morally gray characters in a way that I mean, I get sympathy sometimes, but there's other times that I'm like, oh, so you're just a real piece of shit. And not just one character, like kind of another one of those that's like big on sort of the fallibility of human nature in a way that I'm not here for.
Yeah, now that you mention it, I have sort of turned to Abby on occasion and say, I wonder why they put this story in this world, because I don't know that. I
Yeah.
like it. It looks cool. I like who they cast. I like what everybody's doing with their characters. All that's great, but why? Right? Usually, when you go to the trouble to build such a very specific
And they really
world,
have their world building is not only really good, it's real detailed.
yeah, like they really put a lot of thought into it. So you
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
there must be a reason they're telling this story in here. But you're right. I have asked Abby that a couple times because I guess I keep hoping that something will happen that will make you go,
Tell
oh,
you why
that's
it's
why.
there. But
Yeah.
and don't get twisted. I'm excited. I think this is a great thing to do. Tell because like at this point, it's also not a particularly unique story.
Right. Right. Right.
I could think of a couple of famous stories that I'm pretty sure it matches up with, but I feel like it would be spoiling to mention them. Uh, and I love the idea of let's take, I mean, how many times has it been like, let's do Count of Monte Cristo, but it's the 70s in a tenement, or, let's do Hamlet, but this time they're all lions, that kind of thing. Uh, and so I'm here for it. I'm absolutely here for doing that. But I'm with you. I don't know why they decided that. And the shitty part of me is like they knew it was too weak of a story if they didn't. Or more realistically, somebody's just a fan of this aesthetic who was instrumental in making it. And
Well, so I thought of that one. I thought, well, maybe what they needed was sort of the optimism and all of that stuff, right? Because that really does
that's
play
true.
into it. But
It
then I
is that
thought,
very shiny 50s.
but then they could have said it in the early 60s or something.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know, they didn't have to make it. So, yeah, I don't know.
But maybe it's just fun. Maybe they just think it's fun. Um, and there's also something to be said for taking sort of a known story and setting it out of place so it changes your perspective.
Yeah, suppose that's
If
true.
we saw this story just set in the 50s and 60s of, middle America, we might have been like, yeah, I know, I've seen it before. Whereas this, like, it, say what you will about it, it's got you and I thinking a lot
Mm.
about it. And that can be a thing. Sometimes you just shift that one aspect and it makes you look at the story differently.
Another thing they might have been wanting to do, though, too, is there's a mixed race couple in it. there
Yeah.
are slightly higher profile African American characters than you might expect if you actually went back to the early 60s. So
Yeah. But
maybe they're
I
like,
mean,
you know what, we don't want to
with the
deal
state
with.
of colorblind casting nowadays, I'm not sure that's a good enough
Yeah,
reason.
yeah,
Because
yeah,
you're right, there is a mixed race couple in it. Them being a mixed race couple, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong later, is never a plot point.
Mm.
Yeah, no.
But that's what
It's
I'm saying. Maybe they didn't want
it
it to
is
be a plot
essentially
point.
colorblind cast, but they did pick a premise where you could explain that. But I mean, like, plenty of shows do things nowadays that don't have an explanation for it, and
Yeah,
it's just
yeah,
consider,
yeah,
especially Apple TV. I mean, oh, the forefront of being liberal about that kind of shit.
yeah. I
I
guess
use the
so. I mean,
word liberal very specifically.
I'm just thinking for myself. If I thought, oh, this, this has to be set in the early '60s, where all there's all this optimism and stuff, and then my very next thought would be, but I don't want to load it down with a bunch of racism and all that kind of crap.
That is true. I mean, colorblind casting aside, if you set it at the point where the civil rights movement began, it would be weirder than a
Yeah,
lot of these.
I'd want the freedom to cast whoever I want, to show what other kind of social whatever,
Oh,
so then maybe I would
I
kind of
don't know.
think,
This disappoints me a little bit though, because to me that becomes. I really wanted to set it in the 60s, but I didn't want to deal with all the issues. So I made
right.
it my own society so I could pick and choose. Like, that doesn't sound, I don't like that.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying there.
That being
I
said, something I would do.
Well, that's why I'm talking sort of from my own perspective, because I would think that way. I know I
I
would.
would absolutely do. Like, I really want to play with that, but just the nice parts, please. I don't want to deal with the
Right.
rest of that
Yep.
bullshit.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. As
but
problematic as that is, that's
but
probably what I do.
but as a consumer, I can say, like, that's
Yeah.
that's kind of lazy.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
I mean, maybe the fact that we have this much, I mean, it is you and me. We can talk this much about a paperclip we found on the floor.
Right.
But the fact that it does bring up all this is to be commended right there. I love any movie and TV show that makes me ponder shit
Mm.
because it's so rare these days. Ponder shit in a way that doesn't also make me want to slit my own fucking throat, which is an important distinction because there's lots of shows that would make me ponder stuff if I could bear to actually watch them.
Hmm.
All right. I got other things, but they're not particularly time focused, and we're almost near the end of this one, so I'm gonna save them for next week, aka a half hour from now. Let's do an email. You do it. I didn't bother to get my damn tablet out. So you do it, fucker.
Okay. Um, this is from Stu.
Stu.
He
We call him
says,
the Welshie.
I just watched Whisper of the Heart, a studio. Is it Ghibli or Ghibli?
I mean, good question. As a white guy, I'm comfortable saying I've heard both.
Okay. Well, the
Nowadays,
first,
I think I hear Ghibli more often.
okay. Well, he says he just saw that for the first time. At one point, in a wide shot of a Tokyo suburb, a car turns left and overshoots the turn slightly before getting back in lane. There were a dozen cars on screen at that moment, and I just happened to catch it. The shot barely lasted a couple seconds. What's your favorite completely incidental attention to detail in a film? Oh, so he was impressed that they bothered to put in such a
I
tiny
just caught you.
detail that you would completely miss. So he wants to know what our favorite completely incidental attention to detail in a film.
This is a really good question, and it's also one of those that's really bad for our show where we don't like prep at all. Because I don't fucking remember. But I know exactly what you're talking about, and I have tons of these. This is a great example. Listeners, get in the YouTube comments and tell us your version of this, because you can actually research it and shit, or go to the blog, themagicaltalkinghat.com, and talk about it there. the closest I can get that pops into my head at this moment, and you'll like this, is every single second of The Haunting of Hill House. Like that was the main point of that movie, or that
Yeah.
that TV show. And people have gone through, I haven't done it, but there are hundreds of ghosts essentially in the background that
All the
never
time.
come into the story and things
Yeah.
throughout very deliberately. I Horror is a place where this often ties really well. Um, to just put and it if you do it with enough subtlety, it just lends an air of tension that you can't name, because like you didn't really see it, but you glimpsed something, and that's cool. But I might be straying a little bit. He may just be talking about that thing where, like, for some reason, that 3 second clip, which was wholly mundane, just really like stuck into my brain. And I have those too. I have a lot of those that none of which I can remember right now.
Hmm. Yeah, me too. It seems like I'm often noticing things in a film, and I'll say to Abby, "Did you see that? Let's rewind that. Watch this extra do this, or watch this happen over here." Um, it's more interesting in animation though, because somebody thought to do that.
Somebody fucking drew it. It wasn't just like, well, on shop that day somebody ad libbed. No,
Yeah.
you don't ad
So
lib in animation a whole lot.
no, someone said, "I'm going to make this car do this." No one will see it. Nobody will care.
Although I just watched a video today of movie endings that like actors weren't actually told about until they happened. And some of them were deliberate, some of them were accident and stuff like that. But one that I didn't know, I'm sure you know this, but I didn't know this. When they were filming Empire Strikes Back, Darth Vader, spoilers for Empire Strikes Back, Darth Vader did not say, "I am your father."
Right.
He said, "Obi-Wan killed your father." And
Mhm.
the only people who knew that wasn't what it was Lucas and Mark Hamill, because he had to react appropriately. And then because Edward Edward James almost Edward
James
James
Earl
Earl
Jones,
Jones wasn't in the suit. It was David Prost.
Prowse.
Whatever, yeah.
Well, Priest. Yeah, I think that's how
Yeah.
they pronounce
And so we don't hear his lines, and it's Darth Vader's helmet, so nobody's lips are moving. And so they just put it in afterwards. And there has been a story for many years that contradicted this, saying that David Proust gave away that spoiler 2 years earlier. And apparently it is, and it's very believable because David Proust was very bitter about a lot of things involving those films. But it came out apparently fairly recent that did happen, but it was a joke. Like, he didn't know. He thought he was being funny and told someone that Darth Vader was Luke's father.
it. Oh. Hmm.
But I didn't know that one. I didn't know that one. I thought that was interesting.
I remember when people said that, like it was someone told me before I saw the movie. I didn't believe it. Not until I was sitting there hearing it right from Darth Vader's masked face, that I didn't believe it. I don't
Uh,
know why it was such a big deal to me, but it was a big deal.
there's a web comic called is it Dungeons and Droids, I think? And it is a web comic that uses shots from the Star Wars movies, but the writing in it is under the premise that it is a role-playing game.
Hmm.
And in fact, it came from originally somebody made a web comic called D&D of the Rings, and it was Lord of the Rings, but it was the writing and such was that it was somebody running somebody through this campaign.
Hmm.
And it's really funny because they make a lot of jokes about things that don't make sense in a gaming context and stuff like that. And so somebody got this idea and they're like, "I'll do this with Star Wars." And I mean, I guess I'm gonna spoil one little bit, but uh there's a thing in it where I forget how it works, because they started with the prequels and they played through the prequels. And so it became a thing where some of them reprised their characters much older and things like that. But anyway, the way they ended up doing it, and you didn't really see this coming, is in that version, Luke's Darth Vader turned out to be Luke's mother.
Mm.
And I thought that was kind of cool. And it wasn't done as like a joke. It was actually they have one female player in the game, and she very purposely did this, and I thought that was a neat sort of twist on it, because you really, I kind of got the feeling that I assume other people had when they originally saw it, because I mean, like, Darth Vader is Luke's father is one of those things that, like, I've just always known.
Right.
Like, I don't remember when I learned it. I definitely learned it before I ever saw the movie. But I got to have this moment. They were like, "Yeah, no, I'm your mother," and I was like, "What the hell?" And we're getting like, "Oh," and it's this whole thing where the player had planned this for a while with the DM secretly.
Nice.
But yeah, there's a lot of fun stuff with Qui-Gon Jinn using the spell summon bigger fish, stuff like that. It's pretty fun. And the guy who plays R2D2 is an absolute min-maxer, which is why R2D2 can fucking do everything. He specifically picked a droid because he gets a bunch of bonus points that he can then put into other stuff. And he's one of the obsessed ones that I love. There was one time where something serious was happening, and he lent somebody his D20, and he's like, "I've rolled all the ones out of this." And they had to have a separate, the creator of the comic had a separate explanation of how this happened. And what it is this guy's name was Pete. I think the player's name was Pete, supposedly. You take all your D20s and you roll them. You just drop them all, and all the ones that rolled the ones, you grab them up and then push the other side, and you drop them, and all the ones that rolled ones, you pick them up and you drop them, and any of those that rolled ones, you have to put in a specially padded box so it can't move, so it won't have rolled again, because the odds of a 20-sided die coming up 4 times in a row are astronomical. And I'm like, that's brilliant, while also fundamentally not understanding how probability works.
I rolled all the ones out of it.
Yep. Rolled all the ones out of it. I remember reading that and I was like, that's genius.
Yeah.
Also very stupid.
No, right. That's what kind of makes it genius.
Anyway, I apologize. Actually, I don't apologize. Stu is a huge Star Wars fan. He probably loves this conversation. And also, I think Stu and I have shared a love for Dungeons and Droids. But if not, go find it, Stu. You'd like it. Yeah, see, this is such a great question and so bad for us. Like, because I absolutely know what he's talking about, and it's happened many times, and I'm not prepped. I cannot tell you anyone off the top of my head.
Me neither.
I have fun with the bits where a character, I mean, sometimes they're very intentional. One character just mutters something that is like an underlying joke, that it's a blink and you miss it thing, because there are other lines going on. And sometimes they are so subtle that like nobody else I'm with even caught it, and they often really crack me up. But yeah, sometimes the older I get, and I also like to think you've had an influence on this, I appreciate more aspects of film craft, in that I will see, well, I shouldn't say appreciate. I pay more attention to certain aspects of film craft, such that I'll be watching something and be like, that is an amazing shot in an otherwise dumbass movie or something. Or something where I'm just like, that is such a poor way to shoot that. Why the fuck did they do like that kind of thing?
Right. There was
I'm really uncomfortable. There's a lot of positions you're in currently. I don't know if you can tell on your thing. It absolutely looks like you have a black eye. It's very disconcerting.
So is the gal who plays Wednesday in that TV show, is that Jenna Ortega.
Jenna Ortega. Hey, we're in the SEO.
She
We mentioned Jenna Ortega. Give
so
us all the clicks.
when she was on Saturday Night Live, there was this great sketch where she and one of the cast members were playing these characters that are like in some almost like a CW teenage drama. And she's talking about how she's not going to go to the same college as him.
Oh,
or whatever.
yeah. The Waffle House sketch.
The Waffle House.
Sketch.
That's right. Brilliant. That was so genius.
That whole episode was pretty tight. I also liked the exorcism one, and actually this is tied into this, although it was pretty overt. But she's possessed and she's making a lot of noise, so the black lady from upstairs comes down to complain, and so she says she'll do the exorcism. And there's a bit where she's in the bed and the bed starts floating, and I forget what she says, but she basically chastises her to float back down. She's like, okay. And she's chased. But then the woman goes to the window to yell something upstairs, and as she goes to the window, the bed starts coming up, and she's like, I know you're not behind me levitating again. And she's like, sorry, ma'am. And the bed goes back down.
I didn't see that one. That sounds good.
Yeah. The Jenna Ortega episode was really good. Although I will say, last week, Quinta Bunsen, who created and stars in Abbott Elementary, but who I know from first season of Black Lady Sketch Show, she hosted. Virtually every sketch was good.
Wow.
There were because I always pick the ones I think are good and I show them to Trish, and I showed her every sketch.
Wow.
Now there were two where one I was like, it's okay. And another one that I was like, I actually don't find this funny, but I'm curious if somebody else does. And no, I was wrong. It's not very good. I get what they were getting for, but it was just so broad and ham-handed. But otherwise, no, they were awesome. Which makes sense when you have a host who has done sketch comedy.
Mm-hmm.
It's often really good. And yeah, so there was some really good stuff there. And I love my favorite version of those is the ones where they start and I get the joke and I'm like, this is gonna go on for 3 more minutes, but then it turns and that cracks me up. They had one in the most recent where it was these guys at a club and they want to score some cocaine, and so the joke is they're in the bathroom and a bunch of different people show up trying to sell them cocaine, but they're worried because this is a real life thing right now. Cocaine is frequently being cut with fentanyl, and so it's more dangerous than usual to buy cocaine. And so they're talking about, I want something that's really pure. And so they start talking, mine is so pure and white, it's like a bunny on a snow, like that kind of thing. And it very quickly becomes a bunch of my cocaine's so white jokes that are really good, that are all by non-white actors involved. And it starts to get like, my cocaine is so white, he stands and just looks at his lawn like this. Like my cocaine's so white, and something about Gwyneth Paltrow, and then they're like, well, my cocaine's so white, it's like the guy who's suing Gwyneth Paltrow. so it was one of those. At first I was like, oh, okay. And they've done a lot of those in recent years, and I really like that. Wow, we've gone off track and we're out of time. Please write into the email address, themagicaltalkinghat@gmail.com. Be our puppeteer. Make us talk about shit. Because the alternative is whatever the crap we got going now. So don't let Stu have all the power. I say that because I'm pretty sure next week's email is also Stu. So, but in the meantime, for us, it'll just be a couple minutes here. But for you all, it'll be a week. So have a good week. And Jenna Ortega.